Kentucky is down to their third option, and if they want him, they're going to have to wait.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Friday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade, and we are still on the Kentucky basketball coaching search here. It is a story of the week. Even in a week with the national championship game, this still remains the biggest talking point. I want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Remind you, you can listen to this show ad-free on Amazon Music if you have not checked that out yet. You can also join us on our Discord channel. It is free to join. We're hanging out talking college hoops 24/7. There's a link in the show notes to hang out with us there. Scott Drew and Danny Hurley have both made it as clear as I think they're going to make it that they are not taking the job in Lexington, Kentucky. That pushes Kentucky into looking for a new coach. We're going to talk about who that might be. We're going to talk about some of the other options if they don't get their third option. We're also going to talk about a pair of Tennessee players entering the transfer portal, what that means for Rick Barnes's club. Isaac, Scott Drew released a statement firmly indicating that he has no intention of leaving Waco, Texas, and taking the job at Kentucky. He indicated that he discussed it, that it was a conversation, but that he is planning to stay in Waco, Texas. We just love to see a coach kind of evaluate the whole process here and evaluate that, hey, yes, money is there and prestige is there, and there's various other things that come with going to Kentucky, but that you're also leaving the comfort of your home and you're leaving the comfort of a place that you've kind of built from the ground up where your family's lived. And I think it's nice to be able to step back and remember that coaches are not robots. They are not, they're not on a video game where you just throw money at them until they decide to come your way. Like, that's not how this works. And I understand why Kentucky fans wanted Scott Drew, and I understand why they thought that, hey, if we toss them enough money, like, the Kentucky job is such a great job, like anybody would be willing to take the Kentucky job. And I get that mentality. It's Kentucky basketball after all, but not everybody's wired that way. And I think it was nice to see Scott Drew do that. I know it's not something that Kentucky fans are particularly happy about, and I can understand that as well. But it was kind of a nice moment to see Scott Drew reaffirm his commitment to being in Baylor and helping that Bears program continue to succeed.
Andy, I love that take, and I'm all in on it with you. I mean, the reminder of the humanity in a person was, this is going to sound hokey maybe, but it was just refreshing to me on Thursday to see this statement. Just so telling of what truly matters to Scott Drew, because how many coaches have we seen burn out themselves or their families or whatever it is, and then what's left at the end of the day? And Scott Drew said, I got a really good thing going here. Yeah. My family really likes it here. So, ultimately he has shown us what truly matters to him and has prioritized that. I think that's the key with this, is it's like, you don't have to do something just because somebody throws the bag at you. Because at some point, like he's saying in his quote, basically, we feel like God has called us here. I'm already making $5 million a year. I have everything I need from a basketball standpoint. We're getting high-level recruits, both from high school and through the transfer portal. My family's happy here. And oh, by the way, I don't have to deal with Big Blue Nation. At some point, those things are a thing, and you have to reckon with them. And Scott Drew has. And Andy, some of what's really bothered me on Thursday was people saying, oh, Scott Drew just can't handle the spotlight, or he's not ready for the spotlight. And I would push back on that and say he would kill it at Kentucky. Yeah. Some people just don't need the spotlight to feel like they're making a difference in this world. And I appreciate him so much for being willing to do that.
Yeah, I think, Scott Drew has already done what he needed to do to kind of feel accomplished when he took Baylor to a national championship. That is an incredible accomplishment. And to remember where Baylor was before he took over that program, like the growth, I mean, he will never have to buy a drink again in Waco, Texas. Like, he has been such an iconic figure, and I wouldn't leave that either. And people can say, oh, he's not going to be able to handle it here or whatever, but like, maybe he just doesn't want to. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that that's just a really nice sentiment. And it's similar to the sentiment that we finally saw. I say finally, that we saw from Danny Hurley. He's made a handful of comments about the
How many times does he have to say it,
Well,
Andy?
apparently at least one more, because he's repeatedly said that his focus is on UConn, and people have tried to acknowledge, well, he never officially said no. Like, well, it sounds like he has now. And Matt Norlander tweeted about this and says, there was little doubt as is, but this is final. Sources just told CBS Sport there is a 0% chance Dan Hurley will leave UConn for Kentucky. It's not happening. Hurley staying in Stores with a deserved big pay bump coming for him and his staff. So Danny Hurley's he's not interested in leaving either. And I don't blame him. He just won back-to-back national championships at UConn. Like, why would you leave that? And he had a good quote on the Jim Rome show where he said, once you make a certain amount of money, it doesn't make that much of a difference in your life. And that to me is key. Because even when we're talking about Scott Drew, like we're talking about, oh, he wants to be home. He's comfortable here. Like he's also making millions and millions and millions of dollars. And same with Danny Hurley. They're both making a ton of money. And it's like, I understand that greed is kind of a fundamental element of like American culture in general. But like when you make a certain amount of money, you don't necessarily need to make more money. And it's nice to see college basketball coaches recognizing that, because I think we're kind of living in a time where a lot of people are not recognizing that just in general, but also in the college athletics world with realignment and these TV deals and people jumping at the first opportunity to make a little bit more money. And we're feeling in a lot of ways like it is kind of pulling at the fabric of what makes college athletics what it is. And we see it with the death of the Pac-12. We see it with these conversations about changing and altering the NCAA tournament because certain conferences want to make more money. And that is the baseline, what they want. And that's the only thing that's kind of driving those conversations forward. So it's refreshing to see Scott Drew and Danny Hurley say, hey, I don't need more money to go to Kentucky. I'm content where I am. It puts Kentucky in a tough spot as they lose out on their top two options. And I understand there being some saltiness there, some frustration, maybe even some lashing out at, oh, so-and-so can't handle it because of this. But at the end of the day, like, I think these two coaches made decisions for themselves, for their families, and made those decisions ahead of money. And we don't see that all that often. So like you said, it's refreshing.
Man. Another part of this, Norlander tweeted something else later and said one source on Hurley to Kentucky, they could offer $20 million a year and he wouldn't go. Hurley, the national coach of the year, has the perfect job for him, has the top staff in the country, and is running the best program in the sport. And Andy, that's the thing. No 15 extra, and I know he's going to get a pay bump from the 5 he makes right now. So let's say they bump him to 7. I'm just throwing out a number. 13 million extra dollars is not enough to give you any more than you already have. Yeah. Because what more does he need, Andy? And money is the only thing that Kentucky could offer more than what he's already got. Because guess what, folks? Here's the ugly truth that maybe we don't want to say. UConn is operating as a better basketball program than Kentucky right now. Yep. And so all that Kentucky can do is say, but we've got more money. Cool. I'd rather keep winning championships, have my family where they are, my staff where they are, and make more than enough than any human could ever need or want to desire. That's the scenario that both Danny Hurley and Scott Drew are in, and I want to just continue applauding both of them. And look, I guess I'll get personal for a second. May we all look a little introspectively at ourselves and say, do I have what I need in this life? And do I really need more than what that is in chasing the almighty dollar over and above family and friends and contentment with where I live, Andy? And so I just, way to go, fellas. I love it. Andy, the question though now is, all right, that's great and fine. And we're happy for those two guys to stay at UConn and Baylor, but Kentucky still needs a college basketball coach to be their head man next year. So what we're wondering now, are they going to wait it out for current Bulls head coach Billy Donovan, or does the train got to keep rolling and they're going to turn their attention to different options and somebody they might offer right now? We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about eBay Motors, passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, from LED headlights to exhaust kits and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So where to now? That's what Mitch Barnhart is sitting around his brain over. For those who don't know, that's the athletic director at Kentucky. Because Andy, according to the Lexington Herald Leader, which I've been reading a lot more than I ever have in my life the last couple days, Dan Hurley, Scott Drew, and Billy Donovan were the three names at the top of that list. As we've just discussed, two of those three, or 66.6 repeating percent of those names, are off said list. And so, Andy, the problem now is that brings us to Billy Donovan, whose teams, and we can unpack the specifics of this, but whose Bulls team is still playing, has clinched a spot in the NBA play-in tournament. And so you've been moving so quickly if you're Kentucky, but now here's the dilemma that Kentucky finds themselves in. Do we continue to wait on Billy Donovan, who is still going, or do we, because the machine has to keep rolling, turn to someone perhaps less desirable on our list, but so that we can get them in, so that we can make some moves in the transfer portal, because we're losing everyone? Mm-hmm. What do you do, Andy? That's a tough dilemma.
I'm like, maybe I'm not as big of a Billy Donovan supporter as others are, but like, I don't understand being willing to wait this out. Like, he would have to be, in my mind, demonstrably better than the other candidates that are available to you. And you'd have to feel that there's like a 80+% chance that he's going to take this job. And I don't feel like either of those things are true. And that's where I'm like, this is not the move that I would make. And obviously, I don't know what conversations Barnhart has had behind the scenes.
Right.
If he does have some reason to believe that Billy is pretty confidently going to take the job, which has not been reported, but could be happening behind the scenes. But like, I don't see, like, the worst case scenario for me is Kentucky waiting this thing out at Billy Donovan's team, making the play-in, making it into the playoffs. Then at that point, do you then pivot again? Because you're not going to wait for an entire 7-game playoff series to finish, are you? Like, so you wait, then all of a sudden you pivot to your other I don't think a lot of the other coaches that they're potentially going to talk about, and we'll get to those names, they're probably not going anywhere. Like, I don't think that there's a chance that some of these other candidates are going to jump to another job, like, unless something shocking happens where, like, Indiana does decide to fire Mike Woodson or something like that. Like, their guys are still going to be there, but you're missing out on transfers, you're missing out on recruits, and like, if you hire Billy Donovan, he's not bringing any of that in. He can't bring players from the Chicago Bulls down to Kentucky. Like, that's not an option for him to do. So
wouldn't that be wild though? What if the NBA is like, you know what, we're going to give the NCAA was like, we'll give these guys eligibility. Kobe White, you only played 1 year in college. Why don't you just go on back to Kentucky?
You can go back, right? No, I just, Billy Donovan hasn't coached in college basketball since 2015. And we said this on a recent episode, but college basketball has changed a whole bunch since 2015. And we have seen a lot of coaches leave the industry because they didn't want to make those adjustments. Coaches like Jay Wright, coaches like, Krzyzewski and Roy Williams, who are probably going to retire anyway, but like, they time it so they're getting out of here so they don't have to be in this era where things are so much different than what they're used to. Billy Donovan's been gone for a decade. Like, waiting for him and passing up on again, coaches that I get why Scott Drew and Danny Hurley were above Billy Donovan, and some of these other coaches that they're looking at, they all have warts. They all have reasons that they're maybe not perfect, but in my mind, Billy Donovan's not so much further ahead of them that you're willing to risk this and you're willing to wait, because he hasn't been here in 10 years. Who knows whether he's going to have the immediate ability to navigate the NIL and the transfer portal. Like, these things are just so different. And so for me, I get it. Billy Donovan started at Kentucky. He was an assistant coach there for 5 years. He won back-to-back championships in the SEC at Florida. Like, he's an incredibly accomplished, successful college basketball coach with Kentucky ties. Like, I understand all of the pros here, but the cons just are so much for me right now that this is not worth risking and waiting for, unless you have some kind of absolute guarantee from him, which I think only happens if he's been told by the Bulls, like, hey, we're not going to renew your contract, or you're going to be fired at the end of the year. And I don't think any of that's happening.
And And Andy, this is the most hard-hitting part of this analysis that I'm going to give. Things didn't go very well the last time Kentucky hired someone named Billy. So, I mean, we got to be really careful with
pretty clear factor there.
I remember the Billy Gillespie era, and Andy, I don't mind saying it didn't go great for Big Blue Nation. So, I'm just saying, let's be careful what we know. In all seriousness, with Billy Donovan, Andy, it's interesting. We had talked about on what was it, Tuesday night before the Bulls game. He's like, basically, I haven't been contacted by anybody. My total commitment and focus is here to this team and to this group. I hear that. But Andy, is there any, I'm not taking that job in that?
No, there's not. And that's
right.
A good point.
So I think we do need to recognize that Billy Donovan, unlike the repeated Dan Hurley denials, hasn't actually said, I don't want this job. So I think that is just something to keep in mind. Obviously, I don't, now that Coach Drew has turned the job down and Dan Hurley has yet again done so, I think that he would not now be able to say, I have not been contacted by anybody, because I'm sure they've now reached out and had some conversations. And we don't yet know what those behind the scenes things are. So Andy, this is just something to keep in mind. And is there some level, I know we've been saying over and over and over and over again that the college landscape is harder than ever. But because of the transactional nature of it now with NIL and transfer portal, there might be some level in which that makes the recruiting slightly easier. I just do want to recognize that I'm just kind of thinking of in real time right here, that's a possibility. But Andy, I think, are we ready to go on to, if it's not Billy Donovan, who else, right? Yeah. I think we're ready to move to that. And so Andy, would you just kind of fire off some of the other people we're thinking about that if we either Billy Donovan's not the guy, or we don't want to wait on Billy Donovan, where do we turn?
Yeah, it's funny because we already kind of saw a huge SEC to SEC coaching move with Calipari, of course, going to Arkansas. And three of the candidates that I think are probably on that next list for Kentucky are also SEC head coaches. The top one being Bruce Pearl. And Bruce Pearl, there's a lot of reasons that feels like a logical fit in Lexington, just personality-wise. Yeah, I think he could handle the kind of pressure that comes with coaching there. He's a great recruiter, obviously a solid X's and O's coach. Would he want to do that? Like he'd be going to his third SEC school? There's a lot of questions there, but he makes some sense. And then the ones in the SEC that are maybe a little bit more of a stretch potentially would be Chris Beard and Buzz Williams. I think Buzz Williams is probably very interested in taking the job. I think he would do it, but I'm not sure Kentucky's willing to commit to him. He has rebuilt a Virginia Tech program. He's had a lot of success at Texas A&M, nearly pulled off an upset over the number 1 seed Houston this year. But he's been that team was a little inconsistent this year, so I'm not sure he's quite ready for it. Chris Beard,
they did beat Kentucky twice.
They did beat Kentucky twice. That is a valid point. And looking at Chris Beard, I mean, obviously he was, at the top of the mountain coaching at Texas and has had tremendous success everywhere he's been. He also comes with some fairly significant baggage. So I'm not sure Kentucky's ready to pull the trigger on that one either. And then the non-SEC coaches that I think are in this conversation, Sean Miller at Xavier, obviously longtime coach at Arizona, has had success at Xavier last year. Did not go well for the Musketeers, but his team dealt with serious injury issues throughout the season. And then Mark Pope. And we got confirmation shortly before we hit the record button here from John Rothstein on Twitter that he is a candidate, that the Kentucky is interest, or that there is some level of interest mutually here. I don't know how far down the list Mark Pope is. I don't know how serious Kentucky's interest is. We haven't really seen a lot of further kind of conversation about that, but Mark Pope played at Kentucky. He won a national championship as a player at Kentucky in 1996. He was tremendous at Utah Valley, took over at BYU's, taking them to the NCAA tournament. They had a really successful season in the Big 12. They beat Kansas at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Like, people are really down on Mark Pope as the option here. Like, oh, I'm seeing Kentucky fans, this is the worst case scenario. We can't hire Mark Pope. We got to go somewhere else. Like, I get that it's not the name you wanted. And I'm not, and yeah, it's not John Calipari, and he doesn't have quite the track record as many of the other names on this list. But I'll tell you right now, Mark Pope would not be a bad hire. If that's what it comes down to, if that's your last ditch option, you could do a lot worse than Mark Pope.
And Andy, I mean, in a conversation where we're worried about, can you handle the lights of Lexington, Kentucky? To some regard, it's just as tough as a player there as it is as a coach. And he knows that life. And so Mark Pope can certainly navigate that. And I think he's got the personality to do it. It's just, I like his personality. I like what he brings to the table, but in a similar mold to Bruce Pearl, man, I'm right with you on that. If if it's me out of this list, Bruce Pearl's where I would go out of those 5 names that you just reeled off. I just think he's got the moxie. He's got the like bravado. He's got the like, I'm going to say stuff. And sometimes it's like, what? Come on, Bruce. But okay, fine, whatever. Like I like that. I like that he's been around the SEC for a while. I wonder how many coaches have been at 3 different SEC schools. That would be interesting to look at. But I like that. And I'm with you on Chris Beard. I just don't think there are some schools like Ole Miss that can go ahead and make a move like that. I don't think you can hire Chris Beard at Kentucky right now, right? So there's that. But Andy, there is another name that is in the Big East right now. That what happens in sports sometimes, Andy, as a guy's getting ready to retire, like maybe the Packers re-sign somebody for like a day so you can retire a Packer or whatever it is, right? Might Kentucky bring back the man, Rick Pitino, to live out his glory days in Lexington? The coaching acumen is still there. I know he's worked his way back up through some crazy channels from Greece to Iona, now back to St. John's. And what a wild thing that would be after trying to get that whole overhaul last year, if he would come back to Lexington and just finish out his days there. Andy, is it wild? Is it harebrained? Is there legitimacy to it? I don't know. What do you think?
It's the funniest possible outcome. Like, that's for sure the case. If Pitino's back at Kentucky, that would just be hilarious. I think it's probably pretty unlikely. I'm not sure which side is going to say no, but I think it's probably not going to happen. I think Pitino wants to be in New York. I think he likes being in the Big East. But the allure of coming back to Kentucky would definitely be there. I'm not sure how big Blue Nation would feel. I think at this point, they're probably a little bit more excited about Pitino. Like, I don't think they'd have wanted him over Drew or Hurley, but they might be more inclined to consider it now. But my guess is it's not happening. I think it's pretty unlikely, but it's definitely humorous to think about that as a potential option for Kentucky if all else fails. Well, Isaac, we're going to stick with the SEC a little bit longer because we had a pair of bigs from Tennessee, Jonas Aidoo and Tobe Awaka. They both have hit the transfer portal. That's a pretty tough blow for Rick Barnes and the Vols. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. I want to tell you about today's sponsored Gametime. Folks, now that the NCAA tournament is over, it is time to go take in some MLB action. Maybe it's a last-minute trip. Maybe you and a group of friends decide spur of the moment to go hit up a game. The great news is that Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, they have last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off for sports as well as comedy concerts, theater, and more. And for me, I often worry about my tickets being not real, especially if I'm buying from third-party outlets. But with Gametime's ticket coverage, your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. I love having that peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, Isaac, moving away from talking about Kentucky basketball, which is the topic for the rest of the week, most likely, maybe even into next week, depending on what happens over the weekend here. I think this is going to be a driving conversation for many weeks, many episodes here on Locked On College Basketball. But we always want to keep you up to date as best we can on the transfer portal, on the NBA draft declarations. Obviously, we're kind of still in the early parts of the portal season where we're seeing a lot more players entering the portal, not as many actual commitments yet. But we did see some perhaps troubling news coming out of Tennessee. Jonas Aidoo, big man for Tennessee, really impactful player for this team last year. He has declared for the NBA draft while also putting his name in the NCAA transfer portal, keeping his options as expansive as he possibly can as he looks for what he wants to do next in his basketball career. That was announced on Thursday morning. Tobe Awaka, another one of the bigs from Tennessee, he entered the portal a couple of days ago. So now Tennessee is kind of looking at a pretty barren front court that they have. And Isaac, for a team that's also lost Dalton Connect and is kind of looking like they're going to be a brand new roster next year. feeling like there's potentially some concern for Rick Barnes' team?
I mean, as we look at it, as we record this, perhaps. But in this day and age, Andy, I'm so like, wait and see is where I'm at with all this, right? Because they had also already lost Freddie DeLeon and DJ Jefferson to the transfer portal. Right now, they've only got one freshman coming in. That's Bishop, Boswell, who's a 6'4" combo guard from Charlotte, like 83rd, I think, at 247 Sports. So there's space there, right? There's all of that possibility, but you look and you've got Zakai Ziegler coming back, who thankfully was able to play well this year, was still healthy and all those things. And then I'm expecting Rick Barnes to go be successful in the transfer portal again. Why? Because he was this year. He had the game's best transfer come in Dalton Connect. And what happens when transfers see other transfers coming in? They're like, oh, maybe that could be me next year, right? And so I think Tennessee is going to be a desirable place to go and to play. Zakai Ziegler, you've still got Jordan Gainey. You still got Jemai Mashak, who came in to start some there in the postseason for Tennessee. So there are some pieces, and I think Zakai Ziegler is the guy now. You kind of turn over the keys to him, see what he can do with a healthy offseason, but you got to bring in front court help. And thankfully, there are multiple really, really talented players, front court players specifically, in the portal right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the key is we can be concerned about them right now, but in a week, if they land, an Umar Ballo or a Vlad Golden,
that's right,
or Maxine Renault, or like any of the tremendous bigs that are in the portal, there's also going to be more entering the portal as time goes on. And like you said, I think evaluating how coaches have already done in the portal and how active they are. I mean, Rick Barnes landed the best one, and so I think that definitely makes you feel better as a Tennessee fan, even though it hurts to see guys like Aidoo and Awaka leaving the program. You're going to get some big names coming back in. And
that's right.
And Isaac,
I forgot to mention really quick. You mentioned Maxime Renault. I've forgotten to tell you this until right now, as we're talking to everybody. I had actually heard from a source earlier on Thursday that Renault might actually be thinking about staying at Stanford and finishing a degree. So we'll keep our eyes on that.
Kyle Smith making a big move there potentially.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, when you got sources like that, you always interrupt. If you got that. But Isaac, I did want to, there's so many other players in the portal that we could talk about, that we will talk about, but I wanted to also mention a couple of draft declarations and some guys who are staying in school, because I think that's another element of this that has a profound impact on a couple programs in particular, starting with Marquette, because we know that Marquette lost Tyler Kolek. We know that Marquette lost Oso Ighodaro. Both those guys are gone. They're going to the NBA. Good for them. But Cam Jones is coming back. And that's a huge, huge deal for the Golden Eagles. Shaka Smart has done a very good job of managing to keep talent in the program. And I mean, we saw it last year where they brought basically everybody back. This year, it was definitely the right time for Kolek and Ighodaro to move on. But for Cam Jones, I mean, I feel like he has legitimate All-American potential next year with this offense kind of opening up and potentially being kind of catered around him a little bit. I think this is a huge return for Marquette, for Shaka Smart. This is a team that's, Stevie Mitchell's coming back. If Sean Jones is healthy, David Joplin, like this is a team that could be in really, really good shape, even after losing incredibly talented performers like Oso Ighodaro and Tyler Kolek. And I'll just toss this out there. We talked about it a little bit beforehand. No inside sources here on this one, but Seth Trimble has entered the transfer portal out of North Carolina. He's from Wisconsin.
That's right.
Maybe Shaka Smart could make a move here, land somebody like Trimble to kind of come in and help in some way replenish what you lose with Kolek. Like, definitely something to keep an eye on right there, because if it's not Trimble, it'll be somebody else, I'm sure, that Marquette will add. But Shaka Smart is good at navigating the portal, and I'm excited about what the direction Marquette's in particular with Cam Jones coming back.
Yep. And these first couple of years, Shaka hasn't really needed or wanted to dip into the portal, but like, look, this is the life we're living now, Andy. And at some point, he's probably going to have to. Right now, Marquette has two freshmen incoming, both 6'8" guys, Demarius Owens from Ohio and Royce Parham from Ohio. They're both like top 85-ish guys, outside the top 50. But, just these pieces that Marquette always brings in and develops. So trust in Shaka Smart. Andy, speaking of Seth Trimble, let's go back to the ACC, where Duke, for the second year in a row, has gotten Tyrese Proctor back. We learned just a little bit before recording here on Thursday. And so, Andy, I know that Tyrese Proctor didn't really live up to what Duke hoped he would consistently be this year. I know there were some injuries and those kind of things. But I really, really think Tyrese Proctor could be a magnificent part of what they do next year. I think like if fully healthy, if fully just continuing to grow and evolve this summer, there's just a combination of skill and height and athletic ability that he has that could really help put Duke over the top. So this is, to me, is massive for John Shire.
A couple draft declarations here before we get out on today's episode. Jamal Shead leaving Houston, going to the NBA draft is a tough blow for Houston. I think it was, I'm not sure where people were expecting it ahead of time, but I'm not shocked to see Jamal go on, move to the NBA. Tough to see his career end the way that it did with that injury in the NCAA tournament, but what a fantastic player he was for Houston. It's not all bad news for the Cougs. LJ Cryer and Juwan Francis are both returning, so at least they got that going for him. I'm sure that Kelvin Sampson will find somebody in the portal to help replenish what they're losing with Shed. And then Adem Bona, not really a surprise here, always a guy kind of expected to be a two and done player. He's declared for the NBA draft. It doesn't sound like he's planning to return to UCLA or to college in general. High energy big. I think a guy who could get into the late first round of the NBA draft. Was really enjoyed watching him on a team that wasn't particularly enjoyable to watch for most of the season in UCLA, but Bono was very talented and not a surprise that he's leaving UCLA, but a player who should succeed at the next level.
Mick Cronin to Kentucky. What? No, I'm just kidding. Folks, thanks so much for hanging out with us on a Friday. As Andy said, man, we're just going to have to keep rolling with this Kentucky story until we get more. But obviously, all the other things going on in college basketball with portal things and draft declarations, we'll be bringing it to you and giving our analysis and takes on it every single time. So stick with us all off season long. By the way, just as a reminder, portal is open until May 1st. That's day 45 of the portal. You don't have to declare by then. You just have to be in it. So you don't have to recommit to a new school. If you are not part of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community, come on and join us. The link's in the show notes. It's free to join. If you haven't subscribed to the show on audio and video platforms, it's easy to do and a way to make sure you always get every episode of the show. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. In this case, Wildcats find a coach. And until Monday, or if crazy news drops over the weekend, peace.